does. We were in Iowa, and the Secret Service was there. This is off the record. But the Secret Service was there, and they were across the hallway, Brock and Michelle, and my daughter was getting ready for her tub time. And I took off her clothes, and I turned around to fill the tub, and suddenly she was gone. It's like, oh no. So I ran outside, and she had run into the hallway in the middle of the Comfort Inn in West Des Moines, and in front of the Secret Service, and she was dancing and saying, "I need a breath of fresh air." I couldn't believe it, but it was hilarious and humiliating all at once. But I felt good, right? And I thought, that's when I decided, I really need to, we could make this a movement, although no one needs to see me naked. But just that concept, like, I need a breath of fresh air, right? Let's get some fresh air. And I thought that this spirit was wonderful, and it was one that I promised myself I'd try to take into 2008 and beyond. And so let's all try to do that. But she's a nut, and she's her name, Suhela, is Sanskrit. It means sort of born of the moon, or the glow around the moon. And I did an interview recently in which I talked about that for the first time in a while, but it was sort of paying homage to her mother, who loved the moon. She used to say she was a lunatic. And she would drag me out in the middle of the night to go look at the moon when it was particularly full or particularly lovely. And she passed away in '95, and she can't be here to witness all of this, sadly. Ovarian and uterine cancer. But my brother is one of the sponsors of Johanna's Law to get a better system for earlier detection of those female cancers and to improve research. But I thought I would pay homage to her in that way. She was a remarkable woman. She lived all over South and Southeast Asia. She was very brave and had this ability to, you know, to push away boundaries. She did so simply. And can you imagine, I mean, this girl from Kansas, you know? And the family, my grandfather had a restless soul, and kept moving the family westward through Texas and Oklahoma and Seattle, and then ultimately to Hawaii in 1959 when it became a state, because, you know, it was still the United States. It's as far west as you could go without plunging into the ocean, unless you know, counted the territory. And there she met this African with a booming voice and a regal and rather domineering presence. That marriage didn't work out, but it's produced a pretty great guy. And his name was Barack Obama, too. And then she met my father, who was Indonesian, studying at the East-West Center. Also met him at the University of Hawaii campus, which is where I met my husband, and it's where I send all my single girlfriends. She met my father, and in 1965, Indonesia was going through a very tumultuous time politically, and he was called back. He was on government grant, so she found herself in Indonesia. She came across all these unmarked graveyards because the streets had been filled with blood. It was sort of like the 1950s. It was a big sort of anti-communist witch hunt in Indonesia, and people were being killed right and left. Anyway. She didn't know what had happened, because there's this Indonesian phrase, "Diam dalam seribu bahasa," means to be silent in 1,000 languages. And so she didn't know what had happened. She found out, and it could have been very frightening. But instead of being frightened, what she felt was compassion. What she felt was a desire to sort of help make things whole. She ended up living her entire life in Indonesia, and then in India and Pakistan, and in other places, and in New York, working for organizations like Women's World Banking and the People's Bank Bank Rakyat Indonesia and World Banks and Ford Foundation. She did primarily microfinance, rural credit programs to help women in cottage industries who didn't have enough autonomy in their own lives, not enough freedom over, the lives of, in terms of making decisions about the lives of their children. And not enough security to ensure that they would have a roof over their heads. And she worked with them. So instead of being afraid, she said, hey. And she sort of, she waited respectfully for an invitation, and the invitation, of course, came. And she ended up doing so much good all over the world. And everywhere she went, she sort of made a home for herself, which I think is very, very brave. And I think it's to a great extent why Barack has the capacity to move through his world so effortlessly, so gracefully, and to sort of recognize the common humanity in other people and work to make that connection and to listen hard, and always with the assumption that the other person has something valuable to offer. So I think he would credit her. I think he has credited her with a lot of that. She had more empathy than anybody I have ever met, and he talks a lot about closing the empathy gap. And so that's part of the interesting family. I am married. I married a Chinese-Canadian to mix things up a little more. Yeah, we didn't have any East Asians in the family. We don't have Latinos either, but I'm an honorary Puerto Rican.